Fangames are a fascinating thing, works based in the worlds of pre-existing work, a chance for fans to put their own spin on works of media they love. But despite being in the same world, there's always a touch that you can feel, the personal influence of the life of this new author. That's the stuff that makes these things unique. Whether that be from how the game plays to how the story and characters are presented, you can always feel the life of another person being breathed onto the world, one different from the original author. And that leads us to Home. Home is such a fascinating game. It's a fan game of the RPG Maker game OFF. It was made back in 2015 mainly by the late Felix the Judge, and has left such an impact that Felix is even mentioned upon starting a new game in OFF. And I feel like when it comes to OFF fan games, this is like the one to play. But despite that, it manages to give off a very different feel from OFF, it also being just like it. I feel like some people have a stigma towards fan games, that they're always lesser works to that of the original, but I believe and have heard several others say of how Home is such a high quality game that it not only stands with OFF, but maybe even above it, if not as its own thing. So just what is this game about? Well, the game takes place like 1 second after the events of OFF, but I'll try to keep things spoiler free and act like OFF doesn't exist. Though if you're watching this video and you have no idea what OFF is or haven't even watched my OFF video, I'm gonna be honest, I'm not sure why you're here, but I hope you're chilling out and having a good time. Starting out, you play the role of a cat named the Judge. He is the guardian of one of the 5 zones in this world, and upon being in your control, he foresees a premonition towards the destruction of this world. He then goes on a journey to warn the guardians of the other zones of this calamity, along the way meeting characters that people have really grown to love, and even getting a gang of cats, all the while trying to figure out just what is going to destroy the world, and if he's going to be the one to stop it. But yeah, cats! I can't say I ever played an RPG where you're a bunch of cats, especially one when you're a bunch of cats going on a journey to save the world. This is even reflected in the equipment in game. You equip claws, collars, coats, but it still has that off flair of equipping months of the years and sounds. The Judge himself was just a side character in the original OFF, and this game kind of takes the idea of what if you were playing as the Judge rather than the batter, seeing things and events through his lens rather than the batter, and how your player influence can ultimately change the story. Due to this, you visit and talk to a lot of the same places and people as you did in OFF. It starts out feeling very similar, but the more you play Home, the more something else begins to leak. The differences become more apparent until you feel like you're playing something completely different. It lures you into thinking it's the same experience, and that's when it catches you off guard. But let's slow down for now. As I mentioned in the OFF video, music and presentation are some of the most important factors to why OFF is remembered, at least in my opinion. You'd think with what I mentioned, Home would be the same. I mean, it reuses a lot of areas and sprites, but once again, it's really just a face value thing. I thought my game was broken at first, because I noticed a lot of the sprites were colored. Like, I'm serious, I was like, oh man, did I install the game wrong or something? Because seeing these sprites with colors is so strange. I thought the characters being colorless in a colored world was such an important factor to OFF, like it was made like that for a reason. Just giving these characters colors, I feel, creates a huge difference in mood. Felix said that they gave the characters colors based off official art by Mortis Ghost, the creator of OFF. Mortis has drawn these characters with colors before, and Felix felt like it'd be neat to add these colors in. But the battle sprites are still black and white. And you know what? Let's talk about those battle sprites. I feel like when you see the battle sprites and the art in general, that you get the feeling that Felix and their team wanted to stand out from OFF, because there are no reused battle sprites, even for enemies that did have sprites in OFF. It once again lends to this rather strange feeling that this is different from OFF, because this art style is very different from the likes of Mortis Ghosts. Even to the monster designs in general, you can even say at points it can be rather off-putting. Come on, nobody? Whatever. But I do like this art too. It's just funny seeing the original OFF art and then seeing the newer art. It's a lot more clean. Maybe that's because from what I heard, the OFF battle sprites were pencil and paper drawings scanned over digitally. Maybe even shrunk down a bit too to fit RPG Maker. This applies to the music as well. Even when revisiting some of these same areas, Home never really reuses music from OFF. I was honestly surprised to enter Zone 2 and not hear Desperately Safe. And I think it's cute how quite a few songs have names relating to the songs from Off. Like there is a fight theme known as Ube Tutalur, which translates to Dawn at Full Speed. That's a cool title. It's a conscious choice, but I think the newer music fits well enough. Maybe that's because Felix is an ambient artist himself, but they actually got some music from ACC, who did the music for Off in general. And I'm actually quite a fan of a lot of the battle themes, even the main one, which dare I say, I prefer it over Pepper Steak. I don't know, it just really gives Off nothing? Dang. I mean, it really gives Off this vibe that reminds you that you're going on this silly cat adventure, but you're also trying to save the world. It really puts the situation into perspective, and I somehow never really got tired of it. The boss battle themes are where it's really at though. Quite a few of these songs really mix the ridiculousness of the situations you get put in. There's a lot more songs in general. I mean, that's because, believe it or not, Home is a longer game than Off. Like, Off took me around 5 to 6 hours to beat. Home took me around 9 to 10. But man, did it feel so much longer than that. And that's because of the gameplay. When it came to Off, the gameplay was trash. At least the battle stuff. It was stale, way too fast. You couldn't really tell what did what, and it was too easy. So what about Home? How does it compare? Well, it fixes a lot of stuff. The game comes with a hard mode, which yes, does make the game a lot harder, and it's what I played for my playthrough. But just in general, and in nearly every way, the battle system is vastly improved from that of Off. Your party this time is different from one another, and each have their own kinds of skills that they specialize in. They're not just one note. For example, sure, Elaine has strong physical attack skills, but he can also buff the party and has a sort of stance system going on. Yeah, Valerie has strong magic skills, but he can lower enemies' resistances to certain elements. Jocelyn has mixed attacks, can attack everyone, and heal status effects. The judge himself can be physical, magical, and has healing skills. And due to this game's difficulty, these healing skills are actually pretty useful. Maybe most important, skills are stated whether or not they are physical or magical. Thank you! Equipment is slightly better. Early on you find weapons that specialize in physical or magical attacks, and you kind of get to choose whether or not you want the judge to be physical or a magical attacker. Like, you can also equip months of the year that have some pretty neat effects too, like having MP cost or increasing your speed. I actually found myself thinking at times over the decision of who to give what. It also helps that stats in general make more sense now and are actually defined. This is still RPG Maker 2003, so it's ATB, and the row stuff is still here because I guess you can't actually remove it. Odd. Though I swear Cogdis did not have the row system, so maybe there's a plugin or something. But unlike Off, battles are a lot more slower and manageable, and this is a good thing. Due to the difficulty of this game, I actually found myself doing one of the coolest things an ATB system allows you to do: turn storing. This is when you save a certain character's turn because you aren't forced to act with a character when their ATB gauge fills, so you can just sit around and switch to someone else while that character's turn is on the ready. It always creates this tough situation of, should I go all in and attack? Maybe I should have one character on holdout in case we need a healing item. I wasn't really doing any of this in Off, and I really think that's because I was playing hard mode. Home is a very status effect heavy game. It's actually pretty cool because the character sprites change depending on their status effects, but man are these painful. I have never played an RPG where status effects are so common. It makes me feel kinda good, because if you know me, the first thing I do in an RPG is stock up on those status healers, just get ready for the journey going in. But here, I was getting hit by status effects nearly every encounter. This is the kind of hard RPG where random encounters can straight up fold you. If you get unlucky and get struck with the wrong status effects, you might as well just run, because you aren't winning the fight. Somehow this game manages to handle the money balance very well. Shops sell tons of useful items you'll need to survive these encounters, but you always have to choose wisely with what you want, because chances are, if you buy those MP restoring items, you're gonna miss out on the next equipment set. And I sure hope you saved up the money for some revives, or maybe not, because it's also one of those RPGs where once you lose a character, you kind of already lost the fight. I mean it, these random encounters gave me more trouble than most of the boss fights, and it's not always in a fun or fair way. Yeah. For as much as Home seeks to fix the problems with Off, I found that it introduces a lot of problems on its own. Migraine and mute. Dear God. This stuff gets spammed all throughout the game, but it's especially brutal early on, to the point where I straight up dropped the game in Zone 2 and said, F it, I'm playing Lynn the Lion. These are both status effects. Mute prevents you from using skills, and migraine is like poison for your MP. These two status effects are so common, it's actually incredible. But it's basically like getting your character shut down, not to mention the several other status effects that do shut your characters down. And I know what you're thinking, Spacey, you idiot, just use normal attacks. Oh my god. The normal attack is so bad that it's also incredible. It's actually disgusting, like it makes me sick. Normal attacks are treated like last ditch desperation options. Like if you're using the default attack, then I don't know what went wrong. Why is it so bad? Besides the damage being terrible unless if you're a lane, accuracy. From what I read, the speed stat determines the dodge rate of normal attacks. This applies to enemies too, and the first thing I thought of when I heard that was, well, if enemies get stronger as the game goes on, does that mean their speed stat goes up too? Well, I guess so, because it honestly feels like a 50% chance you will hit with a physical attack. It misses so often, choosing to do it is basically like choosing to waste your turn. It's unbelievable. I guess on the bright side, the crit rate is oddly high, but once again, a lane is basically the only physical attacker, and even crits don't deal the damage his skills do most of the time, so... You know, speaking of physical and magical attacks, there's another weird system this game has. You're taught early on that all enemies either resist physical and are weak to magical, or the other way around. I think it's supposed to be like ghost inspectors resist physical and are weak to magic, and the more organic enemies resist magic and are weak to physical. And this is on top of the fact that there's already elements and elemental weaknesses. But as you remember me saying 30 seconds ago, the normal attack is trash, and most characters will still do the most damage just using their skills, even if the enemy resists it. Like what, the enemy resists magic and I'm attacking with Valerie, the mage character? Well, his physical attack stat sucks, which means his already terrible normal attack is worse, and all he has are special attack skills, so what do you want me to do, just stand there with him and do nothing? It's a very wasted system, and it's so irrelevant that I'm not really sure why it's in the game. And why I'm even talking about it now. But knowing how MP focused this game is just puts more pressure on the random encounters. You can't mash like an off, you use your skills or you die. Run from the fight, have fun being underleveled because then you won't be able to win any fight. Stack up on those MP heals because if you run out, you can't even fight anymore. What's that? You got muted? Migraine sapped away all your MP? That sure sucks, huh? A good amount of the enemies have attacks that straight up take away all your MP instantly? Well, ain't that just the darndest thing? But it's okay because there's boxes that give you full heals. OFF was full of these, it's what made it so easy. Oh, what's that? Oh, you're playing hard mode? Well, good news, buddy. Half the boxes don't heal you at all. It's actually a really good sign to know when a boss is coming up. That's just how the dick sucks. And if you're playing in hard mode, it really blows. And if all this wasn't whack enough, things just get mind-numbing by the end game. OFF was spam strong skills and win, which even for a 5-hour game got stale fast. Home is spam the strongest skills and heals sometimes, which works until halfway through the game when you realize you're handling every encounter the exact same way. While characters get new skills, a majority of them is just the stronger version of a previous skill. Sure, I'm using new skills, but they're basically doing the same thing. Strong attack got stronger. And because I played hard mode, random encounters have the potential to go on for quite a bit. Add that with the constant status effects, and it's just extremely tiring. This is what I meant when I said the game felt a lot longer than it actually was, which really sucks, because during boss fights, I think home is really fun. Not all the time, sometimes bosses are still just skill spam fest, and it's not like a majority of them have any unique mechanics or strategies to take them down. Not even to mention the lack of enemy variety in general, maybe not in appearance but in terms of what they do. Skills have such random names that half the time I have no idea what the enemy is casting, what it even does. Sometimes it says I took damage, but was it MP or HP damage? I'm not sure. Why do I randomly have this status effect? No idea. It's a shame too, because I really wanted to recommend hard mode, because I did find the fights fun, but no spoilers. The final boss killed it for me. It's that bad. But despite this all, I can still say the combat system is alright. It's good. At least I was having fun at points, which is a lot more to say than OFF's combat system. But if I'm comparing your combat system to OFF, maybe that's the first sign of trouble. And I actually think that the hard mode gameplay changes, like the save boxes that don't heal you, are pretty cool. I like that the difficulty actually changes things. It's rare that I play an RPG that not only do I need to conserve my items, but still use them. I need these MP heals to win random encounters to get some level ups. But when it's frustrating, it's really frustrating. Although on the bright side, battling is only a half of Home's gameplay. You may have noticed that I talked about the battle system first rather than the exploration gameplay, and that's because Home is actually a heavy puzzle focused game, to the point where I think the exploration is the better half of the gameplay. Sure, I said that for Off too, but that's because the Off combat system put me to sleep more than my feline friends got put to sleep during the Dead-On fight. Because despite what I said, I like the battle system in Home, and even such, the puzzles in here blow Off out of the water too. And I liked Off's puzzles. Like, the puzzles here are probably the best I've experienced in an RPG Maker game, even in an RPG in general, for being honest. At points, I felt like this was more of a puzzle adventure game than an ATB JRPG, even to the point of having separate difficulties for puzzles. Yeah, separate difficulties that actually change the puzzles, potentially even changing the maps that the puzzles are in. Like, that's a lot of effort. I've only ever seen this split in combat and puzzle difficulties in the likes of Silent Hill, so this is pretty cool. The variety in the puzzles is very impressive too. There are so many different kinds of puzzles, sometimes straightforward, sometimes you have to investigate around the environment. And even a lot that really encourages you to write down numbers, take screenshots. You really have to think outside of the box. It makes me feel smart. I only ever had to use a guide on one of them. No idea what they were going for with this puzzle with the colored blood. Couldn't tell you. I found the moments when I was just moving from puzzle to puzzle to be a lot more enjoyable than the combat system, but I think they do work well when put together. Although I will say near the end of the game, there's a little too many puzzles that are just, oh hey look, numbers on a wall, I wonder if I should write these down. Oh snap, there's the combination code. But I truly was surprised with Home's gameplay. I didn't think it'd be so puzzle focused. There are even puzzles that require you to go into the game's files. I didn't think there'd be so much change to that of Off's gameplay. So even though it has its rough spots, I enjoyed my time. You may be wondering, is it better than Off's gameplay? And that was a joke, because I know you aren't wondering that. We all know the answer. But maybe the most surprising thing to me is Home's story. I had no idea what this game was about going into it. All I knew is that it was just a game where you went on a cat adventure. But then I open up the game and I get hit by the drug abuse and suicide warnings. I peep the readme file and I'm told the game has slurs in it. And I'm like, what the hell? Is the batter about to say a gamer word? Is the judge gonna drop the hard R? I had to know. I mean, I know fan games can take liberties with the world and characters, but I was kind of curious where this was all going. So, without further time waste, that was a joke, all my videos are a waste of time, I think it's time we flip the switch and start from the beginning. This game starts with some quick flashbacks to the judge walking around the purified world, referencing the secret ending of Off. The game begins by asking for your name, because believe it or not, the player is a character too. We are told we are controlling an entity known as the Judge, who is the guardian of Zone 0, and we gotta watch over him. So here we are now in Zone 0. We wake up the Judge, and the narrator lets us know that he is now our puppet, which I probably wouldn't be okay with, but the Judge seems pretty cool with it. I actually really like the relationship with the player and the Judge. I feel like it's a little cold at first, but the Judge ends up talking to the player and relying on them for help a lot. I feel like with the bata, you were kind of just getting dragged along for the ride, and the bata didn't really care much for you. Regardless, apparently someone has arrived, so let's check it out. I always loved the soundscape of Zone 0. This might be a whack opinion, but it's probably my favorite zone in Off. It's just a really chill, quiet area. I know, my introvertness is showing. Our visitor here is a man in a baseball suit. This is the batter, and he's here to help. We all introduce each other while the batter states his sacred mission, to purify the world. He asks the Judge for a card that allows him access to the other zones, which the Judge hands over. I wish you the best of your luck, foolish purificator. Your laudable quest is rather impossible, but do not let me stop you from such endeavors. Thanks. We then play around with the Judge, learning a few puzzles that will be reoccurring. Absolutely can't stand these puzzles here. Yeah, these Narsh security system BS follow the light type beats. Upon completing all the puzzles, the Judge gets a flash to the future, where everything is colorless. He's told that the land is falling apart. The guardians of the other zones have failed. Is he up to the task of saving the world? I don't know, that's pretty sudden. The judge decides it's time to visit the other zones in order to warn the other guardians. It's pretty neat because throughout the journey, areas will randomly flash colorless for a few seconds, showing the judge having these visions all throughout the journey of a future that we are familiar of. We encounter a red box having the ability to travel to nothingness, a limbo between zones. So now that we've finished Zone 0, we go to Zone 1. Zone 1 is rainy and green. It's where we get to meet the most common inhabitants of this world, the Elsen. The Elsen are rather anxious and scared people, always seemingly afraid or worried about something. We continue our search for the Guardian, going through ghost-infested mines alongside the Batter, who is also beating Dick. Well, that scared the hell out of me. Hey, who's that cat? Regardless, when we learn the Batter is fighting some specters in the nearby barn, heading there ourselves, we meet Didon, the guardian of the first zone. Didon is kind of a jerk. He shatters my ears, but he is pretty hot. Yeah, I didn't bring this up, but basically every character, including the Batter, has a sound that plays with them when they talk. Didon gets all pissed off about the Batter fighting the specters. I think there are people who actually like Didon and say he's a nice guy, in which case you should probably quit your job because people shouldn't treat people like this. Didon dips before we can talk to him, and we find the Batter going in at the barn. I love the idea of the Batter saying purification in progress and adversaries purified to himself while fighting. It's like he's giving a little motivational boost to himself. So yeah, the Batter is basically clearing house, but exploring on our own, we encounter that cat from earlier. He's being haunted by the ghosts of the cats that he ate, and we fight them before fighting him. This is Elaine. Despite trying to eat the judge, after beating him he asks to join us. We accept, and he's now a part of the crew. Elaine's pretty cool. He basically just tags along for the food, and I love his relationship with the judge. He thinks the judge is just some weird guy who talks to his imaginary friend, being us. Meanwhile, everyone just kind of roasts him. It's great. And something about his portrait, I don't know, I just vibe with it. Exploring some new areas, we come across Zachary, a toad-masked man with a thicky neck. He's the merchant of the game, but his character kind of revolves around breaking the fourth wall. He's well aware of the player's existence. I'm not sure if you know, but the fandom loves this character. He gives us a book discussing the hot tips on that wax specter weakness mechanic, and we move on. It's here we encounter a panicked Elsen transforming into a burnt. Elsen end up turning into enemies known as burnt after experiencing emotional stress. One such being this butcher who's going around killing Elsen. We dick around at the postal service for a bit. There's even an optional fight against the Batter that's actually pretty tough. But we finally meet up with Didon, or well, the Batter does. He's taking out some specters and aching about. He blames the Batter for the appearance of the specters and says if they meet again, hands are going to be thrown. The judge tries to explain that Didon is the guardian of the zone and not a specter, and thusly killing him would probably kill the zone. This leads to the Batter dropping what might as well be his catchphrase for this game: "It's better that way." He dips out, and so do we. We give chase to Didon and manage to get to him before the Batter does. The judge drops his diss track on Didon and says that he should leave the zone because he failed as a guardian. Didon isn't taking any of this and fulfills his promise of a battle, but with us instead. If the Batter fight from earlier didn't teach you, it's now you'll realize that hard mode can be brutal. Like at one point my team was put asleep, and they were just stuck in that status effect for a full minute. But besides that, I'm not lying when I say I basically just spammed the same skills for 6 minutes. We defeat Didon and seem to knock some sense into him, like a whole personality change. Like maybe we gave him a Snickers bar, I couldn't tell you. He still refuses to leave, meaning that this was basically all a waste of time. So on to Zone 2 for us. Before this, we get a brief glimpse of this cat in a black room, before being taken to the world map. Zone 2 centers around 4 main areas: the library, the park, the shop, and the residential area. Exploring the library, we encounter a cat calling himself Jaffe. He claims to be the guardian of Zone 2, leader of the Spectres, and he is dead set on getting revenge on everyone here. He says the Queen, someone who seems to be more powerful than the Guardians, is sending him Spectres to fight with. The judge recognizes the cat as his brother Valerie, but Jaffe seems to refuse this. We proceed to beat him up, but he H's up a storm and teleports away. Realizing that the situation is dire, we seek the batter for help. We enter the shop, but I like to imagine that this is hell instead. Say goodbye to your MP, and if you're me, nearly say goodbye to this game. Like, get this. Here I am wandering around this box room RPG Maker generated dungeon, and I end up at this randomized maze. I'm minding my own business until these Dorito chips come out of nowhere and start jumping me. I don't know if I was under leveled, which I shouldn't have been because I never ran from any fights, but these enemies destroyed me. Like, these enemies were purposefully made overpowered. But the thing is, you can't run from these enemies. Even out of battle, they'll get you. So if these enemies touch you, you may as well close the game, because you aren't winning the fight. It's like an extended game over screen. Oh yeah, and of course they fight by taking away your MP. Video games. This is the first part in the game that I decided it was that time. You know.
The grind time, prime time! You are great! You
are obnoxious! Stop taking away my MP! So after some grinding, I finally earned my right to continue playing the video game. We beat up some dude in a hoodie and realized that the batter isn't here, so it's time to go elsewhere. The park is pretty fun, Elaine and the judge going through the tunnel of love, and the roller coaster picture is cute. But then there's this dart mini game where you have to pop all 3 balloons in one toss, and I'm just kind of amazed that they put a part in the game where you just mash randomly until the game lets you move forward. Video games. Spacey, you can't just say that phrase twice. Yeah, I can, I just did. Anyways, the batter isn't here either, so we head to the residential area. We then head downtown to see that cat from earlier, Jaffe, ready to enact his revenge on his people. But everyone kind of ignores him. He gets pissed off and summons his specters at the Elson. The batter shows up out of nowhere. Quite literally, the path he walks from leads nowhere, so I don't know how he got there. Maybe he was just pissing in a corner, I don't know. But he squares up and we join him. This is a pretty cool fight, but because there's so many characters on screen, the ATB bar moves hilariously slow. Like, it's kind of amazing how slow this fight is. After defeating the specters, we decide to head to the top of the library to take this cat down, and team up with the batter and his add-on Alpha joining the party temporarily. It's funny because in the previous fight, Alpha had like 400 health, but now it has 1200, far more than any of us, farther proof that Alpha is just overpowered. Not gonna lie, the view up here on the library balcony is pretty nice. I grinded for this view, literally. Upon reaching the rooftop where Jaffe resides, the truth is revealed. Jaffe truly is the guardian of Zone 2, being a bird that had been eaten by Valerie, who was too nice to chew him up. Jaffe decided to take control of the cat's body and enact his revenge. The judge is saddened by this and wants his brother back. The batter is just like, whatever, die. But the judge tells him to let us handle the fight, which really makes me regret wasting heals on the batter and his add-on before the fight, but you know, it's whatever. During the fight, we managed to target Jaffe rather than Valerie and free him from possession. Valerie joins the party as the best battle theme in this game plays. We defeat Jaffe, who admits he let his rage take over him and regrets his choice to turn against his people. He asks to be purified, which the batter happily obliges. We once again see that cat in the black room, who seems to be aware of Jaffe's death. Alright, time for Zone 3. Zone 3 is full of a ton of factories, and the enemy designs here get pretty off the wall. We find a lot of Elson who, contrasting to Zone 2, aren't afraid of the specters, even calling them friends. These Elson seem to be very calm, friendly, and actually enjoy being alive. The judge finds this to be odd, and decides to ask Zachary what's going on. Zachary, now wearing a cat mask, tells us we should head to Area 2 of Zone 3, which we can travel to via the underground monorail. Oh yeah, Valerie's here. There's really not much to say about Valerie, he's just the judge's brother. He thanks us for helping him out even though he's not quite sure about the whole us possessing his brother thing. I think he's had enough of possessing BS by now. Heading into one of the factories, we find a room full of a white powdery substance, sugar, which Elaine proceeds to eat all of it. This causes the Elson here to fight us. The batter shows up to tell us that the guardian of this zone is feeding the Elson sugar and causing them to become addicted. We follow through, but arriving at the monorail station, we are pushed onto the monorail's path and we have to outrun it. And wow, are they going fast. Off was accurate with the judge's movement speed, I suppose. After that's over, we arrive at Area 3 of Zone 3. Narwhal. Climbing up one of the factory pipes, you can get a random encounter against this narwhal. That ain't no specter. But the visual of these cats squaring up with a floating narwhal on a factory pipe is undoubtedly pretty cool. While climbing up, a random bat comes out of nowhere and smacks us, sending us down one of the pipes. Moving about, we find out how sugar is made. It is created using the corpses of other Elson, and through factory treatment, it is fully realized into sugar, given to workers as a reward for their hard day at work. Which is kinda messed up, which the judge agrees with, so I think it's time we talk to the man in charge of this all. But first, oh my god, if this is what normal puzzles look like, I'm glad I didn't choose hard mode. The wild part is that this is even the worst one. On our way to meet the Guardian, our monorail gets stopped by something, and by searching about, we find yet another cat. This is Jocelyn, and she's a very excitable cat that likes to dance. And like any true future party member, we battle her. Big jammer on the theme. After defeating her, she tells us that she's here in order to find her owner. The judge suggests joining the party, and she does. With our full crew assembled, it's time we meet the guardian of this zone, Enoch. He comes off as very enigmatic and selfish, showing he doesn't even trust the queen, a figure brought up several times as the ruler of this world. His demeanor seems to be much of warming happiness, yet his true nature reveals a much colder person. He calls himself a god, and seems to truly believe that how he runs this zone is something that can and will work for a long period of time. Meanwhile, he sits locked away in his room while his people are in hell. He prides himself with how he runs his immoral world, and in the end only bothering to think for himself. In comparison, he seems to make Jaffe and even Didon look good. Filled with rage, we proceed to battle him and beat him. Much like with the other guardians, he comes to his senses after beating him, and the judge explains that his whole zone is whack and that the sugar is bad. Elaine tries to counter-argument this, but the judge, sick of Elaine's BS, hits the mute button. Yeah, he just straight up mutes him, I'm not kidding. Enoch realizes his mistakes and decides to shut down his factories, which is where we take our leave. That cat from before, aware of our actions, is upset that we have left Enoch vulnerable to another entity. Back in nothingness, the judge decides that we should head back to Zone 0 before tackling Zone 4. We have talked sense into 3 guardians so far. Yeah, I don't know about that one, Judge. Didon didn't listen to you, Jaffe's dead, but you did get Enoch to listen, so I'd say you're 1 for 3 right now. Back at home base. Why are people laughing? Anyways, the judge tells Elaine and Jocelyn to stay behind for a bit, as him and Valerie need to discuss in private. Oh yeah, he also unmutes Elaine. The judge tells Valerie that he's getting tired of this all, and wants him to be the leader, which Valerie refuses. The judge begins to say that he feels like he's lived through these events before, and that he was told that one day he would become a puppet as he is now. But upon seeing the corruption and hate of the world, he no longer has the will to try and save it. But seeing how we're in control of him, he doesn't have much of a choice, but to keep pressing forward. Meanwhile, Elaine and Jocelyn roast the judge's crib, while Elaine summarizes the plot. He reflects that he's learned a lot traveling with the judge and feels bound to the player. Meanwhile, Jocelyn kinda just wants to find her owner. I honestly like this moment because it's not too often you get to see these characters interact with one another, and it shows a bit of character with them too. The judge decides it's time to get back to the mission at hand, and we regroup and get ready for Zone 4. So, by now you're probably wondering, Zone 4? What could that be about? Okay, so everything up to now has been what you probably expected, but then we get to Zone 4. This is where the game gets weirdly dark. Like, yeah, the burning bodies was kinda rough, but this displays rather real things. Kind of to an uncomfortable degree, if I must say. It's really out of left field, and I'd say that it's this that has been the baseball bat waiting to hit you if you played this expecting a retelling of OFF. This is also where the content warnings come in full force, so skip if this isn't hitting for you.
Energy exhaust.
What is going on here? What is the world?
Flicker's in the lead, so he's kind of wasting.
Hey baby! I was doing some searching around, and I found that sampling kid, one of the people who did a lot of the music for Home, and I'm talking the slappy fighting themes, the big jammers, you know? Well, it turns out that they did a tribute album to Home with a ton of different remixes of a lot of the awesome fight themes, so check it out. Alright. Alrighty, this zone is blood red, and the music has a nauseating reverse sound to it that's hard to get out of your head. Like, this is the kind of stuff you'd see in an off creepypasta, but it's a pretty messed up environment. The tone is set pretty clearly when one of the first things you witness is an Elson committing suicide, and you see several molars standing on roofs watching, likely ready to jump as well. I knew things were bad when I learned that there was a hospital here. So, what's going on? Apparently the guardian of this zone has left, and an uncurable plague has spread over the land. People are giving up faith, a militaristic group has been formed, with members believing that there may be a cure at the top of the library. There's cats with miniguns coming out of their mouths. There's some books you can find discussing the plague, even showing plague doctors. We end up having to plow through the military force in order to reach the library, fighting armed elves and computer viruses, and even— God dang it! This is it! This is the worst one. Screw this puzzle. Oh my lord. Screw this puzzle. But there are some other pretty cool puzzles here. Reaching the top floor of the library, we encounter a room that seems very familiar to the judge. And it's here that we finally encounter that black cat that we've been seeing. They call us out and blame us for destroying the other zone, saying the Guardian's all dead. They call themselves the Witness and start yelling at the player, telling us that we shouldn't have opened the game. And honestly, at this point, this character is kind of pissing me off, so let's just fight. After beating them, they continue to lampoon us, saying that the bladder is going to kill everyone. But there is still hope for this world, in the form of the 5 grand items, one for each of the 5 elements of the world. Each Guardian has one apparently, but then out of nowhere, like a killer in a slasher movie, the batter shows up. The group wakes up in a purified Zone 1. All the color has been removed, much like a brand account after Pride Month is over. The land is slightly distorted, and there is only one type of enemy here, these Plague Doctor enemies. The world is kind of destroyed now, so without much elsewhere to go, we traverse the purified Zone 1. At one point, Elaine runs into his old friends that he ate, and I'll be honest, I completely forgot this was a thing that happened. He gives up his life for them only to be saved by the judge. We arrive back from where we first fought Dedan, only to find the ghostly version of him, which causes a refight where we earn the Grand Diagonal, one of the grand items the cat was talking about. So, do y'all remember in Mega Man 3, when after beating all the levels, you had to like beat some of them again, the whole Doc Robot stuff? Yeah, that's kind of what's going on here. It's honestly pretty boring and probably the worst part of the game for me. Each zone legit has one encounter, and while the idea of refighting powered up version of previous bosses with your own powered up party is cool, it kind of falls because none of the enemies have any sort of interesting battle design. There's some small story stuff here, like the stuff with Elaine I mentioned, or showing Valerie eating Jaffe, but I don't know, we're just gonna skip this all. I know what you're thinking, but Spacey. And you know what? I was actually thinking about that one myself. Returning to Zone 3, where we fought Jocelyn, we find a woman named Sugar. Trans rights, I know. Jocelyn and her seem to get along pretty well, and even though they don't seem to remember each other, it's implied that Sugar is Jocelyn's owner, which is probably true seeing that Jocelyn never brings up her owner again after this. We fight it out, and Jocelyn gets some cool equipment. Nice. I mean, I think it's nice. I can't really check the stats on it, you can't remove it once you get it, but it's nice that we get something cool for fighting her. Anyways, we clear all the purified zones, getting the grand items from the Guardians, except for Zone 4, where upon refighting the Witness, we don't get an item, implying that they weren't a Guardian, which kind of makes me wonder how the zone got purified by their death if they weren't the Guardian of it, but I don't know, I guess it's in the rules somewhere. We return back to Zone 0, now with 3 of the 5 grand items. The group discusses the plot and wonders what they should do next. Elaine questions that if the judge is a Guardian, shouldn't he have a grand item too? The judge isn't sure about this, but using our powers, we're able to bring it forth from him. I don't know why, but I imagine this part being us straight up pulling it out of his heart, kind of like the Sword of Love from Scott Pilgrim. I don't know, I just think that seems really cool. The narrator tells us that it's time to revisit Zone 4 because there's something we've missed. This is probably a testament to how well written the judge has been so far, at least in accordance to how he was portrayed in OFF, but something about him saying, "Guys, let us visit Zone 4 is funny to me. I feel like he probably wouldn't start a sentence with "guys." In Zone 4, we find a wall leading to a hidden room. We learn about a treasure chest outside of this world, one that contains the secret to getting the grand item. And yes, it is outside of this world. It's in the games folder. In the games folder, there is a zip file named treasure chest, and you have to enter a password learned by exploring or just having past knowledge on OFF in order to open it. And it's in here we get our solution. And that's pretty cool. What's even cooler is that originally, in order to fight the final boss of the game, you would have had to do something similar. Like, the game didn't have the final boss in the enemies folder. You had to manually put them there or the game would crash, and I just think that's awesome. This sadly didn't get fully put into the game though, but it is a cool idea. We get the final grand item here, which upon returning to Zone 0 transforms the box that we've been using to travel to a cyan color. This allows us to access the final area of the game, the courtroom. It's a brown area, and this is either when the plot will make sense to you or just not. Starting out, we find these 4 different doors looking straight up out of a crappy Mario Maker level, and we decide to split up. We take control of the judge, who after a small adventure encounters the batter. The batter finds it odd that the world hasn't ended yet. He wants to bring the suffering of this land to an end. Meanwhile, to the judge, this is his world, and it's his duty to protect it. The two battle it out, with the batter taking the form that honestly kinda reminds me of Zato from Guilty Gear, maybe mixed with Testament. The judge seems to get the upper hand, but sadly it turns out the batter knows Shadow Clone Jutsu. We fade back to the other 3 cats who all met up in the same room after the split. Getting bored of waiting around, they decide to look for the judge themselves. The player gets to choose who becomes their puppet now, essentially becoming the main character for the next part, affecting a lot of dialogue and even changing the battle theme. I'm not gonna judge y'all for picking Elaine or Jocelyn, well maybe Jocelyn, though her fight theme does slap. But I chose Valerie, and I really feel like it's the best choice. He seems to be the one who cares the most about finding the judge, and seeing how the judge is his brother, I guess it's a lot more compelling. But the best part is that this kinda goes full circle to Valerie's character. We meet him being possessed, something that he has been stuck in for years. When he hears about us, the player, he says he doesn't want to become possessed again, which is probably part of the reason he declined the offer to become the leader when the judge suggested it. But here he is, being possessed once more, but this time under a mutual benefit of saving his brother. And I don't know, I think that's a cool bit of character development. He has no problem with us choosing him. In fact, he's even determined, maybe even reflecting that sense of leadership his brother had. Exploring around the area, we find an abandoned shack, where upon using the grand item we got from Didon, we summon him. This is a past version of Didon, one before the creation of the zones, where it seems like they were on some apocalyptic version of Earth. He talks about how apparently tomorrow there will be a birthday party, but the boy the party is celebrating has disappeared. We meet the other guardians who say similar things. As we explore around, things begin to glitch out. It seems like the world is being torn apart and we're at the seams. Using the judge's grand item, we summon him, which upon defeating him, we bring him back. He recounts his defeat at the hands of the batter, telling the group to be wary, and he rejoins as the leader once more. It's here we finally find Zachary again, who hasn't been seen since before the purification of Zone 4, it's been a while. He explained how he got here by escaping the destruction of the land via the nothingness box. He further explains that this is the end game, and I know what you're thinking, but Spacey... And yeah, that's been on my mind for a while, I'm not gonna lie. So by collecting these coins in the purified zone, something special happens here. I was a little worried about getting the coin in Zone 4 because it gets barred off for a bit after completing the zone, as you need to get it from a specific vending machine behind a door that gets locked. But if you revisit the zone now, you can just buy the coin from this vending machine, so it's not possible to lock yourself out of this. But anyways, collecting all the coins will allow us to battle the secret boss of this game, Zachary himself. This is probably the best fight in the game, I'd say. It's also cool from a story perspective, because one of his wings are weak to physical attacks, while the other is weak to magical attacks, and it's kind of a callback to that strange enemy weakness system, which we learned about thanks to Zachary. Upon defeating him, we get his sword as an equipable weapon, which sounds dope, but it's not that hype. Special attack wise, my other equipment out damages it. Its most impressive thing is the defense it gives. It's basically made for Elaine, but it only increases attack by like 5. Small stat differences between equipment that barely means anything. I guess the fan game just wants to nod towards the game it was based off of. But I will say I did start using normal attacks with the sword, maybe just for fun. You can get some really silly damage if you get a crit, but you still miss half the time, so it's not really worth it. Especially in the end game where missing an attack can get you punished by death. Continuing forward, we get a flashback to the witness, whose name is Edna by the way. They hear someone crying for help and go to help them. slapping up several specters along the way. This takes place before the creation of the zone, so I kind of find it odd that the specters are here because I thought they were made by the queen, who was made after the zone was created. I don't know, maybe I didn't understand a thing about OFF. Edna ends up saving the boy that ran away from home, the one whose birthday was going to be celebrated. The dialogue here is rather uncomfortable, like I don't know, the kid kind of comes off like a dig. It's almost like Edna was hypnotized to follow the kid's orders. This is oddly consistent with all the kids' dialogue in this game. I'm not sure if it was intentional, but regardless, Edna allies herself with the boy. A week before the party, he admits to not wanting to become a guardian and runs away. I'm pretty sure this kid is the guardian of Zone 4, and him running away is why that zone is a hellhole. Back to the present, we actually run into Edna, again, who I guess isn't dead, who tells the judge about what he did at the end of OFF, taking out the Reaper, and now it's time to do so again. We go through a rather lazy box corridor segment full of enemies. If you're playing hard mode, this is your second grind spot, and it's here you'll be grinding to max level, which is level 40. We encounter the 3 guardians once more, and tell them that the boy ran away. They decide to cancel the party in favor of working on their zones. Then we finally run into the queen, the person who has been mentioned offhand throughout this entire game. She blames us for destroying the zones, but the judge counters by saying it was actually her that destroyed the land with her specters, to which she said that everything she did was for the boy. And by this point, I'm not gonna lie, I have no idea what's going on with the plot of this game. I'm just riding along. Why is she... What's the point of the specters? I don't get it. Maybe to bring the kid back, but I don't know, they look like they were jumping him, you know? We defeat the queen, telling her all is forgiven. Now, onto the final boss. Pause. Okay, so post-edit space here, I'm cooking some cornbread, so let's get this through fast. I'm working on this video, listening to the OST, and I read a comment talking about secret bosses. So get this game has like 10 secret bosses, not counting Zachary, and I guess most of these are the game devs. Actually accessing these fights though is where things get wacky. You can only do this right before the final boss. You have to go to Zone 4, go to this room, mash on this door, talk to this cube, then these 2 PCs spawn here in Zone 0, ignore them, because first you need to find the hidden dope fish in each of the 5 zones, which apparently I actually found them all except for the one in Zone 0. Say it with me everybody. Oh my god, is that dope fish? Cool. Back to the PCs, you get these passwords of some people who worked on the game, and by typing them in, you can use these stairs that only spawn when you find all the dope fishes, and there's some optional super bosses. Let me tell you, I was so sad when I heard I had to come back and play this game, because this is all combat, and combat by the end of the game of home, it's not very fun. And keep in mind, I had finished this game weeks ago. I was far past this at this point. Like here I am playing through Soma Union, having the time of my life, and then I get dragged to this combat system again. Talk about whiplash. Regardless, these bosses aren't very much to talk about. It's like every other encounter in this game. It's here I really learned the power of Fearless Elaine. He can speedrun fights. Also, this fight against this big old cat here. Talk about an item check. You barely get to breathe. This is the only time I actually used those offensive items, and they seem pretty good. But the whack thing about this fight against this cat is that you don't even get anything for beating them. In fact, nobody here gives you anything useful, at least for the part of the game you should be at to fight them. Some of them just give you normal items too. It's really weird. In the fight against Felix, like, hey, I know you're the creator, but put the hands down. Don't let this description fool you. Felix is here to throw some hands. I actually didn't think I'd win. I was thinking of like a new strategy, like maybe next time, because they were healing for so much. You might actually recognize some of these characters or people, and honestly, this is a pretty cute idea. You always see like devs in games, like they throw themselves in to say hi, but here they throw themselves in to throw some hands. That's pretty cool. So obscure though. Like, how many of you have played through this game and didn't know about this? If I didn't already have most of the dope fishes, I probably wouldn't have done it, but I guess it is cool to talk about it. Anyways, back to Past Spacey. Everyone say hi to it. Hi Past Spacey, hello. It can't hear me, and it can't hear you either. Okay, unpause. Now, onto the final boss. We find the kid and Edna. The kid warns us of someone's approach. The batter shows up, knocking the judge out of the way and straight up killing Edna. Goodbye to that character, I guess. We give chase and manage to interrupt the batter from killing the final guardian. This results in the absolute worst fight in the game. If you aren't max level, close the game. The batter's true form is revealed here as well, being a monstrous duck-like creature. This boss is an amalgamation of everything about Home's combat system. He will hit you with every status effect in the book, which you do not have the equipment to properly resist. Stun is terrible, and he has that weird physical special gimmick going on with his wings, and normal attacks don't even deal damage to him. Yes, normal attacks are truly useless. Incredible. This fight is terrible. Dare I even say luck-based? It's like fighting Ozma in Final Fantasy IX. You can be max level with the best equipment, but if the boss uses a certain combo of attacks, you just can't win. It's really frustrating, and honestly the reason why I can't recommend hard mode. Like, it's that bad. It just killed the game for me. Maybe there's some niche item exploit I could be doing, but I have no clue. 13 minutes of hell later, we do defeat the batter. In the end, we still live on. The judge is saddened by the fact that everything is lost, but the kid says that together they can rebuild the world. They're both still guardians after all. They have the paintbrushes, and the world is their canvas to create. And together, they can create a place that they can call home. Maroon 5's pure imagination plays over the credits scene as the world is being rebuilt. We watch our four heroes explore a rebuilt world, having all sorts of fun. We see the cats split off into their own zones, Elaine chilling with Dedan, Valerie becoming friends with Jaffe, Sugar and Jocelyn dancing with Eggnog, and the judge taking a well-deserved rest. It's honestly such a heartwarming ending. You can tell the creator loved these characters and wanted a happy ending with them. But I guess a part of me feels really empty when I watched this. Like, it made me smile, but I couldn't help but to think of something else during this all. But before we get to that, I guess I'll give my overall thoughts on the plot. I enjoyed it. I feel like it really stumbled near the end. A lot of things didn't really make sense to my interpretation of OFF. And I feel like Felix the judge kind of assumed you saw the game the way they did. So a lot of parts didn't really make sense to me. And I feel like it contradicted a lot with OFF. Like, there was never a Zone 4 to begin with. And if Edna wasn't a guardian, why was Zone 4 purified when they died? But then they didn't die, so then why was it purified? Actually, why is this character here at all? They weren't in OFF. I don't know, I try not to think about it too hard. Maybe I'm missing something. I mean, there's a reason I didn't choose hard mode puzzles. I'm just a silly old monster. I kind of rolled my eyes when they took the whole approach of framing the batter as this terrible bad guy. But I guess it makes sense because these characters, he is a horrible person. I guess in the end, I still kind of side with the batter though. Maybe it's a worldview thing. I guess you could say I'm the hopeless person who would rather give up and let the world die than give it a chance to be rebuilt. But in the original OFF, the kid, Hugo, was dying from a sickness. He didn't run from the batter. He wasn't scared of him. And it certainly never mentioned that he just magically had the power to revive the world. Well, I mean, the judge likely used the grand items to revive the world, as it was shown to be able to bring people back, such as him. And if I knew all this, then of course I would have sided with the judge. I assumed in OFF everything was screwed and the batter was just here to speed things up. I will say I like the characters a lot more. Like, I actually cared for these guys. The judge was just a side character that barely showed up. Most characters in the original OFF were kind of up to your interpretation to the most part when it came to their motives and who they are. But Home is an interpretation, one where the batter is the bad guy and the judge is the good guy, etc, etc. It doesn't really have a lot of mystery to it. It's a lot more clear cut, and maybe that's better to a lot of people. I can say Home has the better characters, and maybe that leads to a more interesting story, but I don't know, over time, am I going to remember OFF's story more, or Home's? I said in my OFF video that I was glad that they didn't make an OFF 2, but this kinda is an OFF 2. It makes the assertion that the special ending in the original was canon, and that this is a continuation of the story. Forever in my mind, when I think of OFF's ending, I'm gonna be like, yeah, the batter and the judge battle it out. But then the judge wins and Home begins, and ultimately rebuilds the world. But despite this, I do like the hopeful message at the end of the game, oddly in a non-literal way. Like, the message that no matter how bad your world gets, even if you lose everything, there's always that spark of hope that you can rebuild. You just have to not give up. And in a way, that's pretty invigorating. Alright, let's just head on to... Oh, snap! A comet! Ooh, where is it going? Oh, shoot! Earth! Move! Move out of the way! Oh! I guess the final thing I want to talk about with this video, much like the OFF video, is the creator behind this project, Felix the Judge. Felix the Judge was the main name behind this game, but has also helped out with other RPG Maker games, and even other OFF Fangames. They've also made quite a collection of ambient tracks. I'll link it all in the description. But yeah, if it isn't clear by now, Felix the Judge passed away from a car crash back in 2017, and this is what was on my mind while sitting through the ending of Home. I just couldn't help but to feel so empty. As I said in my Cog Dis video, I don't really like scrolling through somebody's blog, let alone someone who I know has passed away. It's always weird seeing posts from someone you know that will no longer be able to post. Maybe that's because we're so used to social media and these colorful icons we follow posting regularly, that when we find posts from someone deceased, it's like looking at memories that aren't yours. I don't know. I'm not very good at talking about this kind of stuff, I guess. I've been thinking about this sort of ideology as of late, one about how people live on through their work, and they can still be alive as long as they are in the thoughts of others. The idea of doing something unforgettable, being forever remembered, being like immortality. I don't know, it's some weird stuff to think about, and I don't particularly have any point here. But Felix did create something that people, albeit not plenty, will remember. I know I will. But I won't be around forever either. But as long as there will be people to remember the work and art that they've created, then maybe they can live on forever through that. Maybe there's something to be said about the game Home, and how it reflects the creator, much like what I stated in the opening of this video. But I truthfully don't know much about Felix the Judge, and as stated before, I have no interest being some sort of investigator and searching through their blogs. It's just not any of my business, you know? But going through these blogs and seeing others' thoughts about Felix and their work, well, it really feels like Home is a lot more than just an OFF Fangame. It's not a fan game, it's Felix's game. Sure, it takes someone else's characters and world, but what is created is that through the lens of someone else. And in that case, I think Home is important. Felix's fiance has since gained control of Felix's Tumblr account with the purpose of keeping it up but leaving it as is. They've also started a memorial animal rescue fundraiser in Felix's name, but I'm not sure if you can actually donate to it anymore. Home isn't some massive indie hit. I'd say not many know of Felix and the work they've done, but to the people who did play Home, they'll remember it. Felix's contributions were so impactful that their name was brought up in OFF. It's one of the first things you see, at least in the English translation, which is funny considering Mortis Ghost does not really care for fan games of OFF. And besides Felix asking Mortis for permission to create Home, I don't think there was much of a connection between the two. Like, I'm pretty sure Mortis never even played Home. I don't know, I guess this isn't very structural. I'm sort of just cooling and saying what's on my mind. I don't mean to be rude or disrespectful with the things I'm saying. I suppose I'm not good around these topics, but I did want to bring them up. I don't know how you could talk about Home and not do so. I mean, the main character of Home is the judge. Home. It's a pretty great game, and I recommend you all give it a try if it seems like you would like it. Despite it being a fan game of OFF, it still kind of has that feeling of OFF. There kinda isn't much like it. There's not a lot to wonder about, but what's here is an enjoyable story from someone who loved these characters in this world, maybe even more than the original creator did. And I guess at this point, you might be wondering, is this fan game, essentially the sequel to OFF, a better game than it? Well, I don't think anyone really cares, but I guess if I had to say, I think that—
Hey, Spacey!
Oh hey, what's up? Do you ever wonder if you're spiraling down a never-ending loop doing the same things over and over again? No, not often. What are you trying to say? I just can't help but feel like we've done this all before. I don't know what you're getting at. Are you calling me unoriginal? Who do you think I am? Someone who repeats the same joke over and over again? Get real. Anyways, what was I talking about? I'm sure it wasn't anything important. Nah, I'm just kidding this time with y'all. I liked Home a lot more than OFF, and I think it's the far better game. I enjoyed the story more, the characters, the gameplay. It was all steps better. But at the same time, I enjoyed it for very different reasons from OFF. OFF is very much its own thing, that I dare say is a lot more unique than Home in terms of the ideas on display. Maybe saying home is better is strange, considering just how much it reused from OFF, from characters to areas, and it's not particularly a game I can recommend unless you have played OFF beforehand. I'm honestly not sure if any of it would make sense if you played it before OFF, but that's what makes it cool too. It's like a second playthrough through the world of OFF, but with an overhaul of improvements, new story, a new main character. It plays with your expectations, it twists things, and it gives you an experience that you just won't expect. It has its rough spots as mentioned before, but it also shines in ways that I don't see many games shine. In the end, I think Felix created something special. Something that's worth playing. Something that I can call home.